Resynced drops in 3 days. Assassin's Creed is back in everyone's mouth and expectations are huge. But while everyone is losing their minds over the so-called new Ubisoft game, not enough people are asking the right question. Why in 2026 are we this hyped for a game from 2013? Hey, I'm Atypical and this is Anatomy of a Flop. How does a franchise that invented an entire category, the explorable, historical open world built around an iconic protagonist, end up in a place where his most beloved chapter is 13 years old? And it's not like Assassin's Creed went quiet after 2013. 8 more entries came out after Black Flag, and all of them had massive budget, massive expectations, but every single one was another step down the staircase, until the franchise hit rock bottom, total incoherence with the original identity of Assassin's Creed brand, and the disastrous consequences we've all watched play out in the recent years. And here's the thing, several of those games weren't even bad games, which is exactly the point. The problem was never the games, it's what Ubisoft did to the brand. The first Assassin's Creed comes out in 2007, right in the middle of Ubisoft's explosive growth period. And it doesn't just release, it creates an entirely new category, giving players something they'd never seen before. A historical open world you could actually explore, layered storytelling, and an iconic lead character, all wrapped up in the Ubisoft formula, which back then worked like charm. Nobody had done this, nobody had seen this. Assassin's Creed was that thing, and it worked, and for a few years it kept working. But then something started, something that in marketing has a name. Line extension. It's when you try to push different, unrelated products onto your audience and hope they'll buy just because your name is slapped on it, even when it has nothing to do with what made you who you are. Kind of like if Coca-Cola started making sneakers. For Assassin's Creed, this started quietly, almost invisibly, but from that moment on, the countdown was already running. Game after game, year after year, Ubisoft kept adding to Assassin's Creed. They added mechanics, blended genres, threw in RPG systems, skill trees, loot, open worlds that kept getting bigger and more bloated. And let's be clear, none of these things are bad on their own. In the right context, they work. They can add real depth. The problem is contextual. Every addition diluted the brand's identity a little more, pulling it further away from the one question that actually matters. What is Assassin's Creed? And when a brand can't answer that question, it can't survive in people's minds. The fracture didn't happen in one single game, it was the result of a process that got louder and louder over time. You know, the fracture is real the moment the fans themselves start arguing over which Assassin's Creed is the real one. The fanbase splits, purists who want the old single stealth games and newer fans who prefer the post-2017 RPG open world direction, closer to a different genre than to the franchise's original identity. But here's what actually matters, what the split represent. A community divided between two incompatible versions of the same brand is proof that the positioning is already dead. Because a strong brand doesn't divide people, it unites them. Shadows, the last entry, comes out in 2025, and honestly, the reviews are decent. The game itself isn't bad, but players are already exhausted, and they're not exhausted with the game, they're exhausted with the brand, and that distinction matters. Because you can fix a game, and several entries have been technical disasters, and Ubisoft still managed to course correct on that front. You can ship a genuinely good product, but that's not enough to fix a perception that's been hardening for over a decade. Because for years, Ubisoft diluted the identity of one of its strongest, most iconic brands until it became almost unrecognizable to the people who fell in love with it in the first place. And the only outcome you could reasonably expect is exactly what we've watched happen. And Resynced is the final proof. Ubisoft isn't remaking Black Flag because it's the best game on a technical level. They're remaking it because it's one of the last moments where everyone, pro-RPG shift and anti-RPG shift fans alike, agreed on one thing. That was Assassin's Creed, a game that still had the franchise's original identity, that occupied one clear position in people's minds. But if your clearest big moment is 13 years in the rearview mirror, you got a serious problem. So how did we get here? How does one of the biggest franchises in gaming end up needing this? I'm not gonna talk about Ubisoft collapse over the last few years, but Here's one question I keep coming back to. Is the creative and identity crisis really so deep that Ubisoft can't build a strong new IP or even ship a new Assassin's Creed entry that recaptures longtime fans' attention? In a good way, I mean, because what seems to be happening right now is Ubisoft tried to save itself by digging up old hits from back when the studio still knew how to make good games. And that's the real problem. Assassin's Creed doesn't mean anything specific in people's minds anymore, and when a brand loses its meaning, its market appeal collapses and it can no longer compete seriously. This is the key point. Assassin's Creed failure was never about bad games. We've literally seen how several of these titles, stripped of the Assassin's Creed context, were decent games in their own right. The franchise failed because it applied a line extension playbook to a brand that needed discipline, not expansion. And this isn't just an Assassin's Creed thing, it's a universal rule. Every brand, every market. Because every time you add something to a brand to please more people, you're taking something away from its ability to mean something to someone. Resynced will come out. A lot of people will play it. It will probably be genuinely good. Expectations are sky high, and there's the real chance this ends up being a Ubisoft game that is almost unanimously praised after years of growth. It's Ubisoft though, so I wouldn't bet my house on it, but still, we got good signs. But whatever happens with Resynced, one thing is sure, it won't save the franchise. Because the problem was never the game, it was Ubisoft's strategy, the one that destroyed Assassin's Creed positioning. I'm Atypical, and this is Anatomy of a Flop.